Now I can see the clock. I am honored to moderate this panel, except for Gregg, which I would introduce to today. These are all my friends, so we'll have an Israeli-friendly kind of panel, by which I mean we will speak bluntly, I hope. So who are these people? Shay, I met Shay in the Knesset cafeteria for the first time when he began his crusade against the refuseniks in the Air Force. Shay is an F-16 combat pilot, an ex-kibbutznik. I was thrown out of pilot school, so I admire people like that. After a year, after almost crushing a fuga, trying to, as Israelis do, trying to do a maneuver that I did not yet learn because I felt I was already a pilot, which I wasn't. Amiad Cohen, which you all know from Tikva, and is now the founder and CEO of the Center for Israeli Liberty. He, where's your weapon? You can be tried for that in the army, for leaving it there. Somebody put an eye on his M16. Amiad is now embarked on a new mission, which, of course, is tied to the Conzeptzia, if you think of a deep state, of returning liberties to Israel's citizens. Simcha Rothman. Simcha Rothman is one of the two protagonists in the great drama of the judicial reform that is now on hold. It is now on hold. It has not gone away. But I knew Simcha long before that in the organization that he founded, Atnu'a Lemeshilut V'Demokratia. How do you translate that?
The Israeli Movement for Governability and Democracy.
Has now published an amazing study of how the Supreme Court pretends not to interfere with security policy, but does. And we will speak about that too. And Gregg, I was introduced to today. Gregg is the executive director of the Middle East Forum and also a former official of Israel's foreign ministry and the Ministry of Defense. So why don't we start with you, Gregg? And since you have been in the bowels of the monster, you have seen the Conzeptzia in operation. What is the alternative and how can we get there?
So I think that if we look at 4 or 5 key critical moments in Israel's security history, whether it be the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, 1982, the rise of the Second Intifada, 2006 with Lebanon, every instance brought us to the edge of imminent disaster. But we were able to pull back right at the last moment. And then when our forces won, or in some cases were mired in occupation for 18 years, like in the case of Lebanon, we then had a state commission of inquiry or some sort of body for reform or for introspection. And we said, after 73, the intelligence system must be refined. After 82, we're going to learn about asymmetrical warfare against a non-state actor. After the Second Intifada, we're going to refine counterterrorism strategies. So when you look at October 7th and what the Conzeptzia was prior to this moment, 14 years of essentially trying to allow individuals like Ronen Bar and other members of the security establishment, some who are now members of Knesset, and even one who fancied himself as an alternative prime minister, and other members of the coalition right now who are currently in control, had to ask hard questions of whether it was worth the policy of trying to buy quiet through economic concessions, inviting enemy actors in, like the Qataris, like the Turks, allowing for there to be silence but for a price, which was hundreds of millions of dollars going to underwrite the construction of a terror apparatus in Gaza, strengthening these movements in the West Bank, and allowing the construction of a 7-front field in which Israel had to start fighting the morning of October 7th. So what happens moving forward? There's a few pillars that have to be addressed on this. Rather than having a policy where you will mow the lawn in a place like Gaza, you must salt the earth. Rather than having a policy which seeks to have violence paired with equal violence, or just a little bit more to deter your enemy, you must have total violence, absolute warfare, forcing the enemy to surrender rather than declaring victory because you think the time to fight is over. And I have a few other things, but maybe we could do this more in conversation rather than remarks.
Is this a timing for the full panel? You each have 14 seconds. So why don't you, Simcha, summarize your thoughts in an acronym?
I think the main issues that Israel has to deal with is, and it's true in security, and we saw, and there is a saying that everyone is conservative in issues that he knows something about. So you can allow yourself to be progressive or to go with obscure kind of thinking in issues that you know nothing about. When you know something about the issue, then the facts matter, and you cannot lie to all the people all the time. For many years, I was never. We spoke before on the F-16 and the M-16 that is there somewhere. I wasn't big on security issues when I grew up. It's not something that I wasn't. I was a chaplain in the IDF. I was never a fighter, and I assumed, okay, so probably the people that are doing something on security, they know what they're doing. I was trying to learn about the justice system, and whenever I looked on what they're doing, I said, oh my God, is this the way that the Supreme Court behaves? Is this the way the Attorney General behaves? If this is the kind of legal thinkings that they apply, oh, that's terrible, that needs to be fixed. And then came October 7th. And even people like me understood that the same kind of, I have to say, rot that existed in the justice system exists basically in all systems. In all systems of the state of Israel. We cannot lie to ourselves anymore. And not on security policy, and not on the efficiency of government, and not on the rule of law. Israel was never a rule of law country, never. But we have to be one, because we cannot have the constant bargaining that maybe was good enough when you were a non-state, or you were running a shtetl in Europe, so you can bargain.
What Erel Segel calls a deep shtetl.
A deep shtetl, exactly. Exactly. See what's happening now. You mentioned it with Ronen Bar, the head of the Shin Bet. The government tells him, go away, and he says, okay, let's bargain. I'll go away tomorrow, I'll go away in 2 weeks, I'll go away in 2 months. I want this guy to replace me. I don't get it. Go away. No, let's bargain. It's like in Monty Python. No, we have to bargain. We have to argue on the price. We cannot have security establishment working like this. We cannot have a judicial, any kind of establishment. We cannot do. So to set the rules for Israel, to make sure that the will of the people through elections is being translated in a clear and transparent way, so we will vote our shared friend, I think he's friends with almost everyone here in the panel, Erez Tadmor, and the books that he wrote, why do you vote right and get left? In Israel, the answer, I used to think, why do you vote right and get left? I thought the answer is the Supreme Court, the Attorney General. The answer is much more complicated. It's the security establishment. It's the lack of accountability. It's the lack of responsibility, and we have to make sure that we change it. Judicial reform, if you will, is how to do it in the justice system. We need a judicial reform in the justice system. We need a security reform, and the same applying idea must be present everywhere. You are responsible to the people because we are a democratic and Jewish state.
Thank you, Simcha. So there's the sociology and the ideology. If I hear correctly, what Gregg said is we have to change our operating system to one that wins wars. And what I hear Simcha saying is we can't change the operating systems if we don't get rid of our operating system, of the sociology. So, Amiad, you've been working in the realm of ideas. Is that a leverage from which we can begin to change the trap that we're in?
Actually, I want to be a little bit more optimistic. First of all, it's your mistake. It's not an M16, it's an M4. I came back from the northern border and I have some good news that I want to share with you, and being a little bit more optimistic regarding to the security world. So, yes, there are a lot of changes because it's based, as you said, on ideas and sociology, the people who are running it. And I think the leading people of the IDF and the security establishment today are from the old guard, and they're the leftovers of the old guard. And the important thing that is happening in the security establishment is since the mid-'80s, the beginning of the '90s, a different generation of fighters and generals, they started as soldiers in the '80s and '90s, but today they're already the generals, and there is an alternative, a positive alternative, mostly in the people, in social fabric of the people who are leading. If you know the people, the brigadier generals who are fighting the war in Gaza and up in the north, they are conservative, traditional, based in a very an intuitive, strong, pro-Zionist, pro-Israel, as you expect to have. They're not in the general level yet, but they're getting there in the next couple of years. The second part, that's the social part of it. The second part is the world of ideas, and yes, there's an alternative now. We have a group of fellows sitting and writing an alternative national security strategy for Israel, but you need to understand what the conception was and what's the alternative for that. So the conception started by defining the Israeli forces, armed forces, as Israeli defense forces. Think about it. It's not an attack force. It's a defense force. When you think you're only here to defend, and it comes from a moral background that we don't have the time now to elaborate about that, but yeah. So the basic is it's immoral to win and be victorious against your enemies, to destroy them. It's immoral because we're here only to defend our local shtetl, as he said, here, and we want to live here in a small place without fighting our enemies. But when you are a mature country and you understand you have enemies who want to kill you, you have to destroy them. So the premise of this, the IDF in this war, backed on 67, as you said, 73 and 82, and a lot of mistakes we did in the past, is we're not allowed to win the war. And winning an asymmetric war needs to have two basic pillars. One is occupying territory. That's the way to lose. Your enemy understands he loses, and definitely a jihadist Islamist one, not because he loses his soldiers, but because he loses land. Or the other one is losing his control on the people. So the first day of the war, Herut came to the government and said, there's two things that I'm never going to do. I'm never going to occupy territory on the Gaza Strip, and I'm never going to control Palestinians in Gaza. So that definition comes, I'm here to defend the state of Israel, but I'm not willing to win the war. The new generation of leaders have to say two things. We will always occupy enemy territory, either to negotiate or to withhold. And the second thing is that a government, a regime, a state, a terror organization that has control on people who will attack Israel will lose its governance and will never control its own people, never again.
Hear, hear. I don't know if you've heard Shay speak. He's the combination of offense rather than defense with a calm tone is very, very effective in the media. Shay, you have 3 minutes, and then I would ask each of you to crystallize your message into one slogan sentence, and then we'll end. Shay.
Thank you so much.
Brigadier General Shay.
Thank you so much. What?
הדרגה שלך באנגלית?
Major.
Major General.
Thank you. I feel like in an F-16 cockpit. First of all, I have to look to answer your question and look into your eyes. I have to maneuver between respect the audience, and secondly, there is no time like in an F-16 cockpit, so I'll try to. Okay, so just as a preface, you call this session building a new conceptzia. In Hebrew, there is no word conception, just a conceptzia. In English, conception has two meanings, a wrong meaning and right meaning. But in Hebrew, conceptzia is just wrong. So what is the flawed conception? The assumption that there is no enemy at all. On the other side of the fence, there is only a friend there. And if there is no enemy, at least not a conventional enemy, who would like to invade Israel, so you have to minimize your army to be a very, very tiny army, but smart. An army that cannot be won. And more than that, if there is a friend on the other side of the fence, you need to protect your enemy, your friend. So how do you protect your friend? By legal constraints. You are not allowed to attack if there is any casualties as a result of your striking. You cannot attack if there is a lot of buildings that are about to collapse because of your striking. And you cannot attack if there is no validation to the targets. In other words, if they are not validated as part of terror organizations. And you are not allowed to attack unless you warn first the terrorists. The procedure called knocking on the roof. So,
knock on roof.
Knock on the roof, yeah. So, by the way, in Hebrew, there is a word which cannot be translated to English, like aliyah, hasbara. Do you know what's hasbara? It's always about justification, justify your existence. So how did we get to this flawed conception? By misunderstanding our destiny. As long we actually constantly, permanently prefer the, after 2,000 years in the exile, to come here only to build a safe haven, which is a very good cause, it cannot last forever, for eternity. That's, by the way, the name Netsach Israel. So you always justify your existence. Once you justify your existence, you always trying to bring peace. Peace, it's a good word, but as long as you try to thrive toward peace, you won't get peace.
Shay, you're a pilot, you're now over the target.
Okay, so a lot of ramifications, a lot of consequences, but the most important one, they look, the leadership, the military leadership, the political leadership look over, like terror attacks, again, like a lone wolf perpetrators did it. But the most important one is the tendency of the nations of the world toward Israel. We receive sympathy from the Trump administration not because of apology, but because they look upon the shared values and mission of Israel. People like Mike Huckabee actually think in exactly the opposite of the ruling elite in Israel. So the more we frame our destiny, the more we embrace our destiny, the more we get the world conscious upon Israel. So,
Last sentence. משפט אחרון.
Yeah, last sentence. So I call on the Jews of the world to move. We need to transform the public consciousness. So I call on the Jews of the world to move from a consciousness of apology, of safe haven, to a consciousness of destiny, a consciousness of ownership.
Brilliant. Thank you. Shay, there is a third meaning of conception in English, but I feel this is not the right panel for it. So one last sentence from each of you.
Some nations excel at cuisine, some others succeed in tourism. Israel succeeds in being blindsided by enemies who openly declare their intent. The ability for us to move forward from that means adopting lethality, injecting paranoia and psychological terror, and moving into offense whenever we're at the precipice of fighting a war, not after the war begins.
Thank you. Simcha, you're a lawyer, but think like a copywriter.
I'll try. We are, when we are building a system of government, the saying is you need to build a wise system even for stupid people. Israel has a stupid system for wise people, and what we actually need is a wise system for wise people. And this is not a new conception. We need the old conception, because that's what it says in Sefer Dvarim. It says, I gave you rules, observe them carefully, for they will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations who will hear about all these decrees and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. People that look in Israel today, and specifically on Israeli laws, cannot say this word. We need to make sure that they can.
Thank you. משפט אחד, Amiad, last sentence.
I spent the last 270 days since October 7th on the northern border, and I said to Karen Glick on JNS, one of the podcasts, she interviewed me and said, we have two options, either the third Lebanese war or the last one. Unfortunately, because of the conception, we chose the third one, and I believe, unfortunately, we will have another cycle with Lebanon and other places. We have to start choosing to have the last war with Gaza, the last war with Hezbollah, the last war with the Palestinians, and have the ability to imagine what I call Pax Israeliana, a peace in the region because of the strength of Israel, not because of the weakness of ours.
Thank you. I don't want to sound like moderating death row, but last words, Shay, please.
But actually, to build a new conception, to build a new Conzeptzia, we have a lot of work to do. You know that Jabalia, it's a neighborhood in Gaza, has been conquered 5 times. Herut Levi, when he was a chief of staff, when he was a general, he cancelled the processes to conquer Gaza Strip. So in order to build a new Conzeptzia, we have a lot of work to do. First, we need to move aside the flawed conception, and we need to transform the public to a new consciousness of destiny. That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gregg, Roman. Thank you, the honorable esteemed gentlemen from Vadat HaChukah, Simcha Rothman, Amiad, Cohen, and Shay Kallach.